So this is I guess, the second of two parts, or the third of three parts, or just the third one that we've done. So this one's focused on company readiness for AI. So we've done product readiness, we've done customer data, and all those webinar videos will be available. So this one is, how do you know if your company is ready for AI? So a little bit of background again. Asa Cox, the founder and CEO of Arcanum. I'm a non-technical founder. I'm really focused on the translation of the technology into business value. Spent a bit of time in Toronto and Silicon Valley before I came to New Zealand 8 years ago now. We've worked with a number of different organizations across different sectors, government, utilities, sport, other SaaS companies. And so we've really seen the various responses and the various challenges of different types of organizations, both large and small. We have come across organizations which have been very ready to move forward with AI, and we've seen many organizations that think they were, and turns out that they weren't. So we do really look at these webinars as a summary of our experiences, and this one certainly is something that we've spent a lot of time on over the years, kind of summarizing our learnings and putting it into a webinar. Feel free to ask questions via the chat at any time, or at the end. We have allocated time for questions. It is being recorded, so we will be sharing this with those that can make it, and also with yourselves. And hopefully we'll not run out of time this time. So excuse me. Again, we have worked more recently with other software companies in the not-for-profit sector, the fintech sector, the telco, agriculture, insurance. We work very closely with other technology partners, especially AWS. And so again, through all of these relationships and networks, we get to see a lot of different companies and their readiness for adopting AI. In terms of what we do, and kind of to give that some context, we do deliver machine learning in a very simple fashion. Everything from widgets, so buttons on websites and applications that are powered by machine learning, through to the models themselves. So we do model training, model development, model deployment, model integration, and then model monitoring as well. So we have done, say, over 50 different use cases across machine learning, computer vision, natural language processing, predictive analytics on time series data. So we've got very broad experience in applying it to a number of different use cases. So in terms of what we'll cover off today, again, asking the question why. If you're considering AI, why are you considering AI? The kinds of things that you need to consider with regards to organizational commitment, the journey that we see to organizations embracing and getting value from AI. Some talk on the timelines and budgets required for the AI journey, and specifically getting started with AI. And we will talk about some of the challenges and pain points in that adoption process, and then talk a little bit about the next steps that we see after this webinar. So the why, knowing where you are going and why you are going there is kind of important, so you can decide which path you're going to take, what journey you're going to go on. There are many different ways to get there, but understanding why you're doing it and the motivation behind it is clearly very, very important. We always do a quick survey in the webinar, and if you can pop your response into the chat in terms of why are you considering adding AI at your company. Some are behind competitors and need to catch up. Others feel a need to get ahead before competitors. Others want to stay ahead of competitors. And you may well not be sure yet, or it may be another reason entirely. So there's a number of different motivations and we'll share the results of that as we ask many different people, and we'll share that with you as well in the future. So AI is definitely a journey, and most people that we talk to are just starting out. We do work with some more mature organizations, but most people are just starting out. They're just considering how to get going, then how to put the foundational work in place, and we'll go into that in a reasonable amount of detail, and then how to scale it, how to run sustainably, to give you a little bit of a sense of what the future might look like and what you need to consider. So why should you consider, for your organization, why should you consider AI as part of your future? Well, in the research that we've done, and there's a number of industry analysts, including the Harvard Business Review that we quote there, really, if you look forward to 5 years, 2027, a lot of commentators, a lot of analysts really see that AI will drive competitive performance across all key functions in organizations, and that AI will be universally considered as the core to competitive advantage. So yes, it may seem like from a standing start that seems pretty impossible, but if we think about the progress that's been made over the last 5 years in this space, we think about the transformations and the digitization of many industries and many companies, that 5 years into the future doesn't actually seem that far away, but a lot can be achieved. And AI is indeed getting adopted at exponential rates. So this is why we see, and why others see, as the reasons for beginning to plan to get to the doing part of artificial intelligence. And if we think about the distribution of the crossing the chasm kind of challenge, a lot of the AI has been done in the innovators and the early adopters, a lot of the tooling, a lot of the data scientists work there. But as we start crossing the chasm, and for those that aren't familiar, I highly recommend reading that book. When you start crossing the chasm from a technology perspective, getting into the early majority usage where there's no longer the hype, and the reasons for doing it are around hype. It's really about extracting as much value as possible. So really getting down to the brass tacks, the practical applications of artificial intelligence, and getting value into organizations very, very specifically. So not investing in it for the sake of being an innovator. The early majority really want to start getting value from it as quickly as possible. And that means moving the technology from a field only utilized by experts and getting into that non-expert field. And certainly that needs to happen because as that PwC report says, over 60% of organizations are slower to get going on their emerging tech initiatives because of a lack of skills. So the tooling cannot be just operational by experts. As the early majority begins to adopt it, it needs to be much more accessible and much easier to consume. So there's another kind of view of this looking into the future, and that's around exponential organizations. Again, this is a growing movement now, based off the book by Salim Ismail and the Singularity University. Again, this is kind of very aspirational for most organizations, but it's also a concept and a strategy to really look at. So how do you have disproportionately large impact compared to your peers by using and leveraging new technologies? And that's leads into a number of different ways of thinking when you start analyzing how that might be possible. And the reason that some of it came about was because a number of organizations were thinking exponentially, and a number of organizations that no longer exist or are under threat didn't think exponentially and thought very laterally, very linearly, and that's really caused them to miss the innovations and collapse. So ignoring the past and the lessons that we can learn from the past, is certainly something that we should take in consideration. And so exponential organizations, this is all of the different things that they talk about in terms of tapping into abundance and managing abundance. the scale on the one side and the ideas on the other. We won't go into great details on this, but this is kind of the kinds of concepts that exponential organizations have. Obviously, we can see on there that algorithms is one of the key areas that they identify as an attribute of an exponential organization. And so that does include machine learning and deep learning, self-learning software, getting pattern recognition across all different types of data. Again, the organizations on the right, we all know really well, and they are all exponential organizations with the underlying technology that helps them achieve those things. The other thing that's really, really important is the culture of experimentation. And we definitely see this time and time again in organizations that want to start integrating and embracing artificial intelligence. If they don't have a culture of experimentation, it becomes very difficult for them to get started. If they're looking at big projects, big programs of work in a waterfall, very structured, guaranteed, try and minimize the risk kind of process, then that becomes quite challenging, a culture to start artificial intelligence projects on, because it needs to be experimental. There needs to be the acknowledgement that there will be failings, but there will be a lot of learnings on the way. And so the learnings themselves need to be the value, not just a very prescribed outcome, especially at the very beginning of trying to adopt artificial intelligence. So the experimentation mindset is really, really important. And the data as well that kind of sits behind that. Jim Barksdale of FedEx are sort of like, well, if we've got data, let's use it. But if all we have is opinions, then we're going to go with mine because I'm the big boss. And that's quite often what we see is there's a lot of ideas that come from the top down about how AI should be used, the way it should be adopted. But unfortunately, not a lot of data is used to support those initiatives. And then they become kind of pet projects, and then you don't get the technology team behind it or the product team, and then that begins to really cause some challenges. So as I say, the culture of experimentation and the data is super important on the journey. And if we look at where experiments can happen, it doesn't just have to happen in the IT team. There's experiments across all parts of the organizations. There's experiments that can happen with AI in all of these areas as well. So it doesn't just have to be in the deep dark corners where all of the geeks are. It doesn't have to be just in one database driven environment. There's certainly a lot of opportunities for experimentation and ideas for AI. Oh, there's lots of question marks going here. I'll just keep on clicking through those. And when we look at the ultimate commitment, so there's a growing number of organizations that are calling themselves AI first. Google was one of the first of those. And so for them, the ultimate version of Google embeds is founded on artificial intelligence. I mean, ultimately, their search engine has always been based on machine learning, but they want to get to the point where it will understand everything on the web, and then before we kind of know that we want it ourselves, when we're typing into that search bar, it kind of understands the intent and the context and so on. So for Google, everything that they do has to have a lens on artificial intelligence. And when you look at the way that organizations who are AI first construct themselves, this is the kind of process they go to, where they try and identify the most valuable data. And then because typically they have the scale and the resources, they can then build the teams that build the AI. They have that first mover advantage, or they have that scale. But for the majority of the world, that isn't the case. And so you've got to consider other ways to build or to consume the AI. And then there's the integration of the AI with existing processes. So how do you get the AI across all of your organization? And then clearly the measurement and communication of its effectiveness is really vital. The successful projects that we've seen have had very high levels of stakeholder engagement, and they are taking the organization on a journey. It's not just a little siloed, pocketed kind of process, because ultimately you want to build momentum. You want to be seeing the technology getting more and more valuable, collecting use cases, creating better return on investment. So then you can reinvest the profits from that, and you can get the compounding competitive advantage. This is the journey that those AI first companies have already been on, and they're now seeing the rewards for doing that. And so it's really what is appropriate for your organization, compared to those giants that are Google and Facebook and so on. And so we see different levels of AI in organizations. We got the kind of the machine learning natives, which are a bit closer to those AI first ones, names that we're familiar with, where the whole proposition is based on AI. And then that second tier down, where it's kind of more of an integrated approach, where it kind of is part of their competitive advantage, but isn't necessarily all of their competitive advantage. And then the bottom tier, which is where most people start, is how do you get AI to power a function or a feature so it can enhance either a product or a part of the organization, or a process, or some part of the organization, to really start moving the value proposition forwards. So the journey, therefore, to whatever kind of flavor of adoption you believe is appropriate to your organization is going to take, it is going to be a journey without doubt. And so this is the Gartner data maturity journey, and that kind of moves from awareness, and many organizations that we talk to are even pre this stage, where they're trying to generate awareness within the organization, and maybe you're at that point. But you start at awareness, and that's where there's a group of people that are interested in exploring AI and how it may be valuable. You got the first speculative use cases being identified, and then typically there'll be the setup of a laboratory or lab scale, where kind of borrowing resources from various departments to come up with a bit of a team to start some experiments, some early trials, and ready to break out of that lab scale to something which is more operational scale does require successful proof of concepts, but also that stakeholder management and some of the other things that we'll cover off in this webinar. And then eventually it gets more mature. There's a center of excellence approach, and then it moves on to being more systemic, where all of the organization is beginning to benefit from artificial intelligence. And then you kind of get onto that transformational level, which for many is kind of years into the future. But this is the kind of journey that many organizations, both large and small, but typically more on the larger side, will need to go through to get that transformational benefit of artificial intelligence. So if you're going to break that down excuse me, a little bit more, this is what we kind of see as part process, part kind of assessment, in terms of readiness to start moving forwards with artificial intelligence. So we'll go through this in some sections. The first section is, do you have data scientists, which is kind of one of the fundamental requirements for being able to do artificial intelligence, or do you have access to data scientists, whether it be through an agency, through a partner, through software potentially, but having access to the machine learning models that data scientists generate clearly is a key resource to require. And then there are additional tech resources to enable the data scientist, or enable the integration of the models that you can have access to, either internally or externally. And we'll talk a bit more about what those tech resources look like a little bit later on. And then it's really important to have that data champion, and what the person who really wants to push this forward, who owns the use case, who maybe owns some of the balance sheet or the profit and loss, or maybe they're a functional leader, but they do have that understanding of the domain, but they are data centric. So to really understand how it will be used, how it will be integrated, how to understand it, how to analyze it, having somebody that's going to champion it is really, really important. And sometimes that person may need some more political kind of weight in order to kind of keep this moving forwards, or sometimes they can just own the proof of concept and know that they will be handing off to somebody else in the organization who will then take it to that next level of scale. The other key part, of course, is having identified some proof of concept. So being able to go to the organization, whether it be broadly or narrowly by function, to understand what kinds of proof of concepts is the organization interested in, what pain points could it solve, and then from a technology perspective, again, maybe there's some experiments that have already been done with a cloud provider. Somebody in the organization has played around with some AI to kind of get those early learnings of what might be possible, and that they can be fed. That knowledge can then be fed into the critical next step, which is identifying that hero use case. So we've seen time and time again that the proof of concepts or the use cases that people bring to us are either too big or they're too small. So sometimes it's very strategic, it's top down from key stakeholders, and it's unrealistic because either the budgets are too small, or the ambition is too high, or the technical resource available is just not the right one. And on the other end of the scale, sometimes it's too small to actually get anybody's attention within the organization. So it needs to be a balance of size, but also of impact. And more importantly, it needs to have a clear path to building momentum. So one successful use case can lead on to another, that you can build knowledge, you can build value, you can build momentum behind the application of AI. And then equally as important is connecting it to the strategic goals of the organization. If there isn't a straight line into something that somebody at the top table really cares about, something that will get onto a report or a board presentation, then again, it becomes quite hard to kind of build that momentum within an organization. So things like, is it connected to revenue, reducing cost, efficiencies, risks, user metrics, if it's more product centric? You know, the AI hero use case needs to be connected to those strategic goals in some way. As I say, it's about somebody caring about the success of it. If they don't, then quite often it'll be a tick box exercise, and then it will just go away, and you've got to fight again to build the momentum. And then associated to that use case is having a detailed ops plan, the alignment of the resources, the alignment of the timelines and the budgets and all those things, which is that final step. And then hopefully the successful use case then unlocks investment. It's always much better to have a budget that could be unlocked if it's successful. So understanding the metrics that will kind of move on to that next phase, turn it into a program. How do you then move from some borrowed resources into a center of excellence type model where there is a group of people dedicated to working on the next use cases? And then how do you make sure that there's a realistic timeline? And realistic actually sometimes may mean making it shorter rather than longer. We see projects where the timeline is talked about in 6 monthly increments or even years. And really that means you're not going to build momentum, because really you can move a lot faster. But also there's others that we've seen where the expectation is it can be done in days, when actually realistically it needs to be weeks or months. So really understanding those timelines is also going to be really important to continuing to build that momentum. So when we talk about timelines and budgets, what is right? And that's, kind of how long is a piece of string, or horses for courses. But it really should be impact and return on investment driven. So, a pretty simple way to prioritize it is, how do you value the impact? How do you measure that impact? And again, if it's associated and connected to a strategic goal, it should be easier to get that measurement and turn it into something which is tangible. Is it connected to revenue? Is it connected to a cost base? Is it connected to some kind of scaling? Whatever it is, you should be able to measure that impact, and then obviously take away the cost and the time associated with doing it. And then when we start looking at the various considerations, so things can be done, either there's the internal or external way of executing on these things. When we look at the time boxes internally, it's likely to take longer because expertise is needed to make it go faster. So if you work with the right external partner, it should go faster. There is a view that if it's done internally, because it's already headcount which is paid for, it's viewed as cheaper. But if you multiply that headcount by the time it takes, then sometimes it doesn't actually work out to the total cost of ownership can end up being more expensive than working externally. Quite often, if you're working with expertise, you can kind of have fixed price, kind of cost contained kind of projects as well. If you're working internally with non-experts, then the risk of failure might actually be a little bit higher. Again, working with external parties, there should be a lower risk of failure so long as it's set up right. One of the key benefits that we see people use to justify internal development is that there will be more learning. But what we've also seen, and we encourage greatly with our clients, is the transfer of knowledge during the projects from the external parties. So it doesn't have to always be a trade-off of do it internally so we learn. And if you work with the right partner, you can get those benefits as well. And we're very much on the crawl, walk, run, kind of fly modality. So finding something that you can do quickly and cheaply, but again, so long as it has the right impact, and then iterating on it from there. So beginning to build both the internal knowledge, the internal commitments, the internal understandings, and kind of continuing to build on it, rather than having a portfolio approach across the organization of disconnected value propositions, building on one to another, we see is really, really valuable. And then eventually getting into a systemic program and into a kind of core function where you're really able to be competitive by your utilization of AI. And then into the planning phase, again, because it's quite often new for people, building business cases can be challenging, but are really important. We find going through really detailed discovery processes to pull together all of the elements of why you're doing it, what data is available, what resources are available, what does good look like, what do experiment metrics look like, access to the relevant tooling, access to relevant expertise. All of these things are really important to get done up front. So then you can really have confidence being able to deliver that hero use case. There is an ongoing misconception that the AI is somehow magic. There is also a lot of messages in the market, typically from the biggest vendors, that AI is somehow plug and play. Again, in our experience, neither of these things are true. AI can certainly have the appearance of being magical once it's implemented well, but it's a journey to get to that point. And getting it to the point of being plug and play is also pretty challenging unless you're working with very, very predictable kind of shallow use cases. It's very hard to make it that kind of level of consumer like experience. So there are some pain points that we want you to consider. And so we kind of break these down into three things: process, tools, and talent. On the kind of bigger picture, kind of we know that there's a lot of tooling involved in machine learning. Some of it you may need to consider how to build internally. You may need to understand what software to bring into your organization to enable artificial intelligence. And some of it is enabled by talent. The experience of being able to do these things, both in terms of the technology, but also the journey to development, that building of momentum, the engagement of stakeholders, and all of the other things that we kind of talked about. So some things are powered, enabled by technology, and some are by humans. And so when we look at the process of that kind of end to end, but also top to bottom, typically people have spent quite a bit of time and money and effort in recent years making the data more available, whether it be doing cloud migrations or moving from legacy databases to more open access. Some may have data analysts and begin to start employing data scientists as well. Some, as a result of that continuation, may have some data engineering capability. And then at the other end, there's been more investment in modern applications. So front-end applications and integrations, API layers have become quite familiar and popular. And that's then also brought about expertise around DevOps and CI/CD and that kind of thing. What is typically missing in organizations understandably, if you haven't started working on AI already, is the ML engineering capability, which is pretty complex, and then also then having that layer of operations around models and machine learning to kind of help with that scalability, the monitoring, the performance management, and generally having that same cadence that you've got around DevOps, but for machine learning and AI. And then on the talent side, say this is kind of more of a New Zealand view, but machine learning, AI is a new function. It's a new capability. It's still maturing in terms of the talent in various markets. A lot of it can be learned on the job, but you also need quite an academic background and a foundation, especially in the data science side. And say machine learning engineering is a subset of that, which is even more specialist and even more new. So we do see a number of organizations that get started in a DIY kind of mode. They have some developers who have maybe done some online courses, or they've had a play around with AWS or Azure or Google, and they've got some data analysts who then try and move forwards to kind of be data scientists. But in our experience, they are quite distinct capabilities. And we see quite often the things that have been tried to be built internally are great for the proof of concept sometimes, or prototypes, but typically don't scale because the excuse me, the non-expert users don't know the challenges at scale, and they may be able to put a few things together, but understanding how to actually deliver it at scale, again, is not something which is easily learned through an online course. So to summarize what we've gone through in this session, so to say that you are ready for AI, you kind of need to look at these various things to be true. So you understand why AI could be needed in your organization, that there is data or user insights that can identify some opportunities, but also that you've really gone through the organizational process to understand that you've got the use cases, you've got the resources, you've got that journey kind of planned out, and then you do have the plan to overcome the pain of implementation, and you've got the right time and budget to be able to do that. So at this point, more than happy to take any questions from Preeti or Richard. I know, Richard, you're moving around, but if you've got any questions at this point, feel free to unmute and ask, or pop them into the chat. And if you haven't,
at the moment, yeah.
Oh, hi, Preeti.
Hey, nothing from me at the moment, yeah. I mean,
Okay, thank
still
you.
trying
Well,
to understand or absorb these details. Too many on the slides, yeah.
yeah, we'll send them through to you afterwards, so you got time to digest them a little bit more. But actually, what would be good feedback once you've done that, Preeti, is to if we could understand what level of detail would be more consumable for you. So that'll be really useful feedback for us as we look at different webinars for different types of audiences.
Sure.
Okay, so if we, I think we had just a couple of responses in here. So yeah, the kind of getting ahead and staying ahead is certainly where a lot of people are. There's only a few industries where catching up is required. Certainly, fintech, entertainment, those kind of things are catching up. But I think there's a growing realization that getting ahead and staying ahead is where artificial intelligence is being considered. So we've been through these steps. We kind of thought about why we should do it, what kind of organizational commitment is required to be AI first, but also even to be AI integrated. We've looked through the journey to getting to AI adoption and considered the different balances of time and budgets, and internal versus external. kind of look through some of the pain points to consider around processes, tools, and talent. And now we kind of look at the next steps, which we've got. Well, this is the one today for the company ready for AI. We will look to put out some other webinars. We're quite keen to know what kind of topics you might be interested in. So either in an email exchange with Sophie or at any time, let us know what else you'd like to know about AI. And we do have an online readiness assessment, which will be shared via email. And we're more than happy to work with organizations one-on-one to go through a similar session, maybe with a broader audience, to try and understand what the journey for your organization might be, working towards either that first step to find that hero use case, but also what the longer term journey might be. And again, you can start playing around with some AI on our platform. You can go to arcanum.ai and start for free, and you can play around with a number of different AI components that we've got on our platform that cover document processing. They cover internal operational use cases as well as user engagement use cases, sentiment analysis, outlier detection, a whole bunch of different things that may be applicable to your organization.